Worldometer website or
Yeah, I do.
Worldometer.
I check it
Yeah,
every morning.
I look at every. I've got a super. It's not a superstition. It's a. I don't know what you call it, but when I go shopping for shit on eBay, I don't allow myself to do that after looking at all the deaths on Worldometer because it just seems like shitty to go, hey, here's a fucking bunch of dead people, and now let's go see what baubles I can buy Carol. So I can't go from the Worldometer to some place that's fun. I have to go Worldometer to Twitter, and then I can go someplace fun. So that's just ridiculous, but that's what I do. But anyway, if you look at fucking World, and also if you look at I mean, you're not going to argue it's the media if in October or September or November the number of new cases per day starts climbing to like 40,000 a day in the U.S. You're not going to say that's the media.
I will, and I'll tell you how. I'll tell you why. Because I talk with shut-ins, and these people are usually Democrats. I only know one Republican that's a shut-in. And what happens is this. If you look at the Worldometer chart, you can see that the numbers, the deaths go down, but they don't go down like a ski slope. They go down, they go up a little bit, which is called a spike, and then they go down again.
Well, it's generally by the day of the week.
Don't interrupt me.
All right.
So my point is, every time there's a little spike in an overall downward, so they're always going down, but with little spikes, what happens is the media releases a whole bunch of articles that scare the shit out of my Democrat shut-ins, and they say, there's a spike! There's a spike! And also the media likes to target red states or states that want to, or counties that want to end the lockdown. So what will happen is this. Orange County in California will be pressuring the governor to end the lockdown. And then the numbers will be going down, but there'll be a little spike. Suddenly you'll see all these articles. There's a spike in Orange County. And then my shut-in Democrats that are crazy and scared will say, Lance, there's a spike. And they'll always be right. That's why I don't argue with them, because I know they've been brainwashed. I always say, oh, okay, so there's a spike. But I know why they're saying that. It's because, it doesn't go down directly. There's always a little spike, and that's how the media frightens Democrats.
Yeah, but no, that's not what I'm talking about, because I'm mathematically sophisticated. I know about statistical variation. Especially, I've coached the fucking SAT, and to get good at the SAT, though the SAT is going away, and that's one more thing that's going to get killed by the coronavirus. Because to take the SAT, you have to be in a fucking room with 30, 40, 60 other kids for 3 hours. And it's impossible to group administer it right now. I think all the Ivies have said we're getting rid of the SAT, and a bunch of other colleges. But anyway, the almost extinct SAT, to get good at it, you have to take about 20 practice SATs to see your increase in skill overcome the bounciness of your performance. But it's like the stock market. It's all over the place, and it's only when you look at it over a period of time that you can see trends that are not impossible to see in the day-to-day variation. So when if I were to talk about a spike in the state of Florida, it would be that this month, it's the 21st, Florida has set 8 records for most new cases in a day. The record in May was 1,400 new cases a day, and after 8 new records in June, the record is over 4,000 in a day. So that, to me, is an indication of an upward trend and not just like statistical blips.
Yeah, but Governor DeSantis has addressed the issue, and he says it's because they're testing so much more. That's the explanation.
Okay, but all right. So, I mean, there are reasons, but I know I don't think you're reasonable about some stuff, but I know in general you're kind of a reasonable person. And if you see numbers going up in a way that isn't just sensationalism in November or October, you're going to it'll be hard. Anyway, we don't need to argue about that.
I will argue with that. I'll tell you something. I'm not going back into lockdown unless they force me. So if numbers start going up again, I am not going to live like this. I want Americans to get back to living normal lives with the fear that you are taking a risk when you leave the door.
Well, let me ask
I
you
don't.
this.
Yeah.
So you go, I mean, I don't think, I don't, you know, other countries are more amenable to locking down or whatever, like South Korea. Like those guys, like they were wearing masks before. Japan was wearing masks before. If you're in a restaurant with your girlfriend and I'm at the next table and I say, and my wife says, or I say, look, I'm a fucking hypochondriac. Would you mind? Well, no, restaurant's not a good place because you got to put food in your mouth. But say we're, I don't know, just like, I don't know, in a movie theater, or like, if somebody asks you to in October.
I can answer your question.
Okay.
I actually have a shut-in, and we've analyzed it. She's 70 years old and she's obese, but she
Okay.
does want to study with me. So I told her, look, I will wear an N95 medical grade mask and gloves, and you can do the same. And I want your business, and you want the lessons, and that's what we'll do. And we worked that out. So to me, I'm not crazy. It's not a matter of principle where, no, I refuse. I'll do it under rational circumstances. So I do wear a mask and gloves for a couple of my shutaways. But
Okay.
in a movie theater, in a restaurant, walking down the street, going to the beach, going to a clothing store, I'm sorry, guy. If you're that scared, you can wear a mask or you can stay home. But the rest of the people are going to go on with their lives.
So I don't think we have a significant disagreement about this, that I think people are going to work out ways to live in the world. You remember how long it took. It took years for people to get used to cell phones and then to smartphones. Um, how do you? I mean, it took like when the first people with the big bricky cell phones. They would swing those things around. They would talk to really loud and bank lines, and people wanted to kill them. And then everybody got phones, and so you couldn't kill everybody. Um, and then people also learned to moderate their behavior. And now cell phones are annoying, but not like crazily annoying. And we've all learned to live with them and use them more or less. But it took 10 years of, and so
Yeah,
I think we're going to evolve. It'll take a while, and it won't be perfect, but I think we'll evolve new behaviors.
yeah,
Um,
and I'm hoping that's not true. I had 20 people in my studio this week. None of us were masked. None of us were gloved. We were shaking hands. We were eating in the same vicinity. We behaved like it used to be. And that's how I think people want to be. Everyone in this industrial park is acting normal. No one's wearing gloves. No one's wearing masks. And because you're a statistics guy, you can see that the death rate is going down. It's going to, I hope to God, but Rick, I think it's just going to go away. We'll be able to live
I
normal
don't agree
lives
with you
for a
about
month.
that, but okay, so I got two more things. One is the hot weather thing, and I would argue against that because if you look at the states where the number of cases are going up, they haven't disappeared. Now, you can argue it's because of increased testing, but still, increased testing shouldn't be enough to to make the numbers be as increasy as they are.
I
If
have an even better argument, Rick.
But hold on,
I
but let me
for the
let me finish
past
my
3
argument, then
months.
you make yours. Like Brazil. Brazil is
Uh,
is such a sweltering country that the official uniform in Brazil is your naked ass hanging out. None of their pants have asses in them. It's just butts all over the place. And Brazil is, I think, number 2 in the world now for cases.
well, I
It,
can
you,
look it up, but I can assure you that the countries on the equator, I don't know about Brazil, got to admit, but for the past few months, I've made cursory examinations of countries in Egypt, in Africa, and the Middle East, very hot countries, and they are light years behind us. The amount of Wuhan in a place like Dubai,
Do I need to?
it's gone. You can look at the worldometer and you'll
No,
see
do I need to
the
do it like a perfunctory, like it's yeah, Wuhan is politically? Do I need to bring that up or fucking?
well,
I
I
don't.
mean, I'm talking about dozens of hot countries. I'm talking about so I mean there may be some politics in one of them, but I mean all across the equatorial countries and in Africa and the Middle East, there's not that much Wuhan. It's just it really hasn't been any big deal. So I know that heat has something to do with it. And if I'm wrong, in 2 months we'll be dead. The whole country will be they'll be stacking the bodies up. So
No,
so you know
I would argue that a lot of the countries um, where the hot countries you're talking about were late to be infected because just the things they weren't getting as many people coming with the coronavirus as other countries. And then when you look at the infrastructure in these countries and the political structure, there a lot of these countries I think are shitty at reporting. But if I would just go off of Brazil, hot ass country, right on the equator. Nobody, everybody is wearing butt thongs, and they're gonna. I mean, they may even overtake us for number of cases. They're just chugging right along.
all
Um,
right. Well,
and
I
then
can
one
look it
more
up
thing, which
for
is
go ahead.
you'd call me a shut-in. I go out. We sold that car that that you were looking at for a while. We went to CarMax today, and we went through the whole deal, and they made us a good offer.
What'd you
Um,
get for it?
1,200.
Fantastic. Good for
So
you.
we and um, so we went through the whole thing. It took an hour and a half. Um, there was a lot of sitting around and anyway, like I'll go out. I'll try to avoid the dickheads without masks. But I mean, I go out, but like,
That would be me.
yeah, well, like depending on the where we're situated, you know, I might at some point I might ask, can you anyway, or I might just drag Carol like 10 feet away, or just whatever. But like,
Put her between you and the other person.
no, because what Carol gets, I get. Because we sleep next to each other. But anyway,
Uh,
like I've got a pretty good idea of my rough idea of my risk levels, and I just like minimizing my risk probably more than a lot of people. I've got a raised risk because I'm 60 and because my kidneys are possibly a little compromised. Um, but I know that I'm being like more risk averse than a lot of people would be. But that's my fucking choice, and uh, it doesn't mean I'm crazy. It just means that maybe I don't want a one chance in 80 or one chance in 200 of dying or being put on a ventilator if I catch this shit. Whereas
well,
other people,
by the way, I'm sorry. Did you want to go on?
no, that's just it. I mean, yeah, I'm
All
being
right.
more risk averse than a lot of people.
But by the way, have you heard about the steroid that they discovered in England at Oxford
Yeah,
University?
yeah, and I don't know what does it knock it down by your risk of dying by a third or more, 40%.
Uh, yeah, or 25% if you're at the point where you need a ventilator. So what it does is as you know, one of the things that kills you is your body overreacts, your immune system. And
Yeah,
they call it a storm. There's a fancy medical name for the kind of storm, but
cytokine, yeah, something like that.
something like that. Yeah, cytokine. CYT. Anyway, there's this storm of your body overreacting, and the steroid, which is perfectly safe, reduces fights that storm, prevents it, thwarts it, prevents it from happening, and so your chances of dying just went down by 25% now, because the steroid is cheap. It's in use all over the world. It's every pharmacy has it.
Yeah.
So I would just like to say that that's one more reason not to be as afraid. And the exciting thing is this actually affects you when you're really sick. This is when it's most effective. So not only so your chances of dying, if it was 1 in 200 before, it's
1 in 100. 270 now.
Yeah. So that's all these things should serve to keep people from being
one more thing.
Shut away. Yeah.
The risk has to be worth it. I went back to the gym twice.
Okay.
And this is I go to a bunch of different gyms. I like doing different shit at each place. And I walk in and it's stupid in there because they only make you wear masks when you enter and when you leave. So everybody who's working out next to me, nobody has a fucking mask on. And it's like, I can work out at home. I don't need to run this risk just to do the fucking shoulder press machine, which is primarily what I do at that gym. So it has to be worth it. And is it worth, whatever the risk is, 1 in 250, 1 in 80, to go fucking to Tender Greens to get the tuna plate? It's like, fucking,
I think what it's going to turn out, I'm actually happy when I hear that there's more cases, because that means that your chance of dying is actually much lower than we thought. And I think at a certain point, Rick, you're going to be faced with the possibility that it's 1 in 2,000 that you're going to die. And you might say to yourself, I would like to live my life and just go back to normalcy, and I'll take the 1 in 2,000 risk.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
I actually feel like if you've ever driven on some of LA's freeways, you're already taking that risk. So,
there's people who are professional risk assessors say that people really have a shit idea of the relative risks of what they do. And yeah, I drive kind of like an asshole. And so, you're right about that. So let's move on from this. Let's talk about...
Wait, before you say anything, I've been trying not to forget, and I didn't keep notes. I wanted to thank one of our loyal viewers. Winston Smith came up with an argument I've never thought of, and I just want to give him credit for it. He made a prediction in our comments that if Trump wins, there will be hellacious riots. And I realized, my God, he's right. Of course there will be. So thank you, Winston Smith. That's a topic if you want to discuss it.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Let's talk about, I would, just at first thought, I'm super lazy, so I don't read the comments unless I'm really prodded to. I can't even fucking change the fish tank. I'm a terrible fucking person. But it depends on how the victory plays out. I think there will, if Trump does get reelected, that there will be some rioting, but the extent of the rioting would depend on how hinky the election seems.
Well, you know that if Trump wins, the Democrats are going to say he stole it.
It depends. When Trump won the first time, there was widespread consternation, but there wasn't really rioting. There was the Women's March within, I think, of a week of him being elected, right?
Yeah, I remember the pussy hats.
Right, but like that, those weren't riots. People weren't fucking rioting,
Well,
though.
now we've got now the
Well, but
Democrats have built up to rioting, and that's
well,
what I think
now
we're
we're
going to have.
primed to riot. But I feel like when Trump got elected, people looked at the numbers, and they were tight, and they were tight. I mean, the actual numbers were tight. You know that he won by various tens of thousands in these important swing states. Um, but nobody, people were suspicious of the numbers to some extent. You know, Jill Stein raised several $1 million from pissed off people saying she'd um, get recounts done. Um, but people, there was not,
I
people were not,
remember it was no, okay, but I think there will
people
be.
weren't distrusting the results to any great extent. There was some skepticism, but not great skepticism.
I don't think it'll be a matter of the results of how hinky it is. I think that if the Democrats don't get their way, they'll simply release their thugs onto the cities just to say, "Fuck this shit. We didn't get what we wanted,"
I
and
disagree. I disagree. I think
that's
I
what they're
mean,
doing now. That's
regardless.
what they're
All
doing
right. So
now.
but let me just say, like, if Trump wins, yeah, there will be rioting, but will it be like apocalyptic rioting? Only if the results are super hinky. If say for instance, like the stock market has been holding up pretty well. Let's say by November, let's say you're right, the COVID has gone away, that fewer than 50 people are dying every day across America. Um, and that the stock market has the Dow has hit 30,000, and of the 40 million, 42 million people who were unemployed or lost their jobs in the past 2 months, 25 million of them are back to work. Um, and the polling, where Biden is up 10 points now, it's narrowed to 2 points. If all that shit happens, and that also Trump like performs strongly versus Biden in the debates. Um, if all that shit happens and people can see why Trump has narrowed the gap, the polling gap, then I don't think rioting is going to be crazy. I think it'll. On the other hand, you know, if Biden goes, if the the day before the election, Biden's got a 9 point lead, and he's leading in all these swing states, and then you know what I'm saying. I don't need to make the whole fucking
Yeah,
argument.
but my point is that we don't even have an election right now, and we're having riots where I don't know, hundreds of people may have been killed by now.
No,
I
not
mean,
hundreds of fucking.
they at least I know at least 20 people died in the first couple of weeks,
Okay,
and the
20
riots are
people
still
isn't
going on.
hundreds. 20 people isn't hundreds.
No, it isn't. But what I'm saying is that these riots still happening. There, I mean,
Yeah.
there are, and and they're still violent.
Um.
Uh, so, I mean, my point is there hasn't even been an election, and we've got these kinds of riots.
Well, I
And
don't think there's not. I mean, there's that Chaz thing, but I don't think they're rioting. Somebody did get killed in the Chaz. I don't even know what fucking Chaz stands for, um, but I don't see rioting happening across the U.S. right now. I
yeah,
see
they're
protests still
right,
happening.
but there have been thousands of businesses have been burned
I know
across
not
the country.
thousands. I don't think thousands. Anyway,
Well, what I'm saying is every major city, every major Democrat city has had rioting. And in each one of
no,
these
every
cities,
major city, more than 200 cities had protests. I don't know about riots.
I am talking about rioting, which is what most of these protests turn into. Um, and there have been businesses burned across the country. You know, here's another thing that I find interesting is that whenever I talk about the riots with a Democrat, they
Yeah.
always try to play it down like, oh, it's no big deal. It's not that important.
No, they aren't.
And
They, I
no,
mean,
no, it's
I
very,
can't
the
argue that.
Republicans, well, okay, good, because that's a measure of your sanity. But most of the
But
Democrats I know love the riots. They don't call them riots. They say they're protesters of injustice.
yeah, but like I
And
mean, I think the only business that's been burned, and they didn't deserve it in the past week, is the Wendy's where the guy who was sleeping in the takeout line got shot in the back.
Yeah, but I'm not talking just about businesses being burned. I'm aware of all the statues that have been destroyed and things just getting vandalized all around the country. And destroying statues is a violent act. I mean, I think these people, when they're pulling down huge, huge statues that weigh, thousands of pounds, this is not a small thing. And it's all over the country. And also, there are periodic uprisings of the Black Lives Matter movement, and Antifa has not been thwarted. Nothing's happened. They're still around. So I'm just saying that I think this is just a taste of what we're going to get if Trump gets elected. And also the other thing is that Trump's hands are tied because the governors of all these states won't let him send in the National Guard. So the Seattle, for example, is occupied territory, and and like yourself, none of the Democrats are interested. It's okay, that's fine. Let them take over a major
I don't know
American
anything
city.
about it because, like, how big is the frickin' occupied place?
Well, it's 6 square blocks. It's about the size of downtown LA. I mean, not
It's a
all,
6 blocks by 6 blocks, so
something
36
like that.
blocks.
Yeah. There are
That's not
hundreds.
nothing.
Well, there are hundreds of buildings. There are thousands of people in this area that are now subject to the governance of anarchists. And the
All right, so you
Democrat,
know what? But I don't want to argue about that because I don't know anything. But we can argue about it
yeah,
next
but
week. I'll study up
again,
on
this
it.
is another one of those subjects that I've heard about every hour for the past 3 weeks because of conservative news sources, but the Democrat news sources you listen to have no interest in the subject.
No,
I
I
think it's
personally, no, no,
vitally
I
important.
personally have no interest in it
Well,
because,
I'm not that interested in it, but at least I know what happened.
but that brings up another subject I want to talk about,
All
which
right, if
is
you're going to do that, let me get a glass of water, okay?
all
Hang
right,
on.
the news. Let's talk. Remind me. So, all right, JD, we're breaking for half us that the news has problems. The news media have problems, right?
Right.
So, I would like to say now. I don't want to argue about. I think we can probably agree to some extent that we can take a look at policing in this country. That's not something I want to argue about because I want to get to other shit. But I would
Well,
argue.
I think there are a lot of bad apples in the police department. I said this last week and the week before, and they need a way of getting rid of them.
Okay, so yeah, so we don't have to disagree about that right now. But I would like to see after we take a look at the police, I would like you know America to fucking take a look at the news because the news has is the news doesn't do its job right. Um, when I was a kid, I used to love the national news because in a half hour, the national news, network news, CBS, ABC, they would show you a lot, like what you thought was the most important shit happening in the world in a half hour, right?
Okay.
Now it's fucking 19 minutes with 11 minutes or more being ads and like the fucking ABC News. And I would think all the nightly news do this. And it really, I shouldn't be watching the national news on a broadcast channel because why? There's enough other places to get the news. But sometimes it's nice to see everything kind of distilled down. But those fuckers, they will run in a half hour show, they'll run 4.5, 5 minutes of ads. They'll come back for 45 seconds and do two stories in not any detail because each story gets 20 seconds. And then they'll come back and they'll do 3, 4 more minutes of ads. And it's like, fuck you. How can you call that like news? And then we disagree about which 24-hour news station does the best job of presenting a balanced view of the world and the stories. And I just see various ways to fucking reform the news. One is that the news was never supposed to be a profit center. The news wasn't supposed to pay for itself on the networks. So, fucking, if you're going to run a half-hour news show on a broadcast network, at least 24 minutes of that shouldn't be ads. To give your fucking viewers a chance to see some actual fucking news. Just 6 minutes in that half hour should be ads maximum. Next thing is the 24-hour channels should be obligated to show some minimum number of different stories, so that to guarantee that you're going to get informed about a bunch of different shit. Like when CNN, when Malaysian Air went missing, it was fucking that plane fucking all day, every day, the fucking plane. That's not news. That's just because some executive figured that's what people want to see. That's bullshit. That any one news story shouldn't be allowed to occupy more than like 10 minutes of coverage per hour, right?
Okay.
All right. And then there should be some way of we're used to looking at scrolls of all kinds. Like you've got the lower third chyron rolling by, and if you watch a financial channel like CNBC, there are up to 17 different little tickers and feeds all over the screen. We can handle that. So if you're running a news program, or even maybe an opinion program on a news show, there should be some way to cite sources when somebody's saying shit. So anyway, all these things, I don't know how feasible that is, but anyway, we should fucking fix the news.
All right. I'm going to say this, and this ties in with the rest of the most recent events, the Trump rally. I listened to an hour and a half of it, and I was disappointed because there wasn't a lot of discussion of policy. And there was a lot of discussion of personal anecdotes and, semi-humorous little stories, but I felt fine about it. I enjoyed it. And I listened to it in a room full of other people, and we were laughing. I mean, the jokes worked, and I don't have to laugh. I don't laugh easily, so I know that he was funny. And I thought about it afterwards. I thought, why is it that he wasn't making a deadly serious speech about policies, even though he kind of mentioned policies? And the reason, I think, goes back to your description of the news. If you listen to the news, particularly the leftist news, which is CNN, NBC, PBS, you would think that Trump was a monster. You would think all these terrible, terrible things about him, that he had Parkinson's and he had dementia and he hated children, and just, he was being bribed by either China or Iran or Russia or all three of them. And after listening to the guy speak for an hour and a half, what he was doing was he was saying, hey, regardless of what you've heard of me, regardless of what stories, here I am. I'm a normal person. I kid around. I tell jokes. I have a life. I get upset when they lie about me. They make up stories. And he was just making, if you were objective or if you were neutral and you listened to it, you would think, well, this guy's not a monster. And I actually think that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to say, look, well, for 4 months, we've been going through hell. I've been painted as a monster. I just want to have a rally where I'm me, and I just talk about things. I just uh, let people know a little bit about me, and show them I'm not a monster. So anyway, that's my theory. All
All
right.
right,
Do you have
so
another subject?
I
Go ahead.
have some agreement with that. I think that a lot of the shit that we don't need to argue about it because obviously, as a liberal, I think a lot of the shit that Trump has done is monstrous. But in terms of I looked at a lot of the, I don't know how much of it I looked at, but he does, that's where he does best with in front of the public is at those rallies. Um, and in terms of campaigning, there's a place for that. Whether you think there should be a place for that, the campaigning is a place to communicate charisma, if you have any. And we're in the pipeline right now where that's happening. Now Biden makes appearances, but they're pretty low key because he wants to let Trump, paint himself into a corner with, with the help of unsympathetic media, right?
Sounds reasonable.
Okay, so, but somebody was arguing on Twitter, and I've argued it myself, that the better communicator wins the presidency most of the time. I think that's what the argument was. I would argue that charisma is a huge thing. And again, well, and communication is part of charisma. But like, frickin' when you put Bill Clinton, when you put Reagan, when you put Kennedy, somebody was arguing, saying that the presidency has been forever sullied by charismatic candidates, that now you can't have a viable candidate who's not charismatic, thanks to Kennedy and thanks to Reagan. And I don't know. I would think that it's probably been that way even before Kennedy and Reagan. Fucking Harding, one of our worst presidents, was got the nomination and was elected because he was a very handsome man by the standards of the time.
Yeah, but you left out one point. That was the first election where women had the vote.
Okay. Well,
And
but women have had the vote for 100 years.
right, right. But I would argue that some research could be done to prove that maybe this charisma, this charm, came in when women started voting. Maybe
That's
before
interesting,
that.
but we're all
Maybe
women
before
now.
that.
We're all attuned to charisma now.
I don't know that I am, but I mean, but by the way, this brings up another subject, and that is that I think that Trump has a chance. Now, if the economy doesn't improve, you outlined very effectively, the stock market, the unemployment, what has to happen to make people feel better about the economy. I still think that's critical. But I've also noticed that there are a lot of polls that are showing that the people that are voting for Trump really like Trump. And the people that are voting for Biden, almost to a man, say he's too old and they wish that there was somebody else. So the problem with an election is that there is something called the enthusiasm issue, and people that don't really like Biden may not go out and vote for him, but people that like Trump will go out no matter what. So that is an argument in his favor.
I think the enthusiasm gap has been narrowing. And I would argue that people have argued that Trump has an advantage that doesn't show up on polls, that there are secret Trump voters, maybe even 1 or 2% of all voters, are people who won't tell a pollster they're voting for him because they're embarrassed to say so.
Absolutely
But
true.
okay,
I
but I
guarantee
would
that that's
argue
true.
that given who Biden is, that there may be secret Biden voters too at this point, because people like to say, as you said, that they're lukewarm about Biden. So maybe people aren't, so and
I don't think so because there's no consequence for saying that you're voting Democrat. Whereas I can assure you that I've been blackballed from art opportunities in the art world because they know I support Trump. There are consequences. The Democrats, if they find out you like Trump, they will get even with you. They'll do something. Whereas I don't see any consequence for a Democrat
yeah.
for
So
someone
I mean,
saying they're
that's
voting for
that's
Biden.
that's
But wait,
true.
but wait,
But wait,
there's
one more
more.
thing. One
All
more
right, go ahead.
is there may be secret non-Trump voters this time around among women, married women, where the husband is a strong Trump supporter, and the wife is like, yeah, she also. But when she gets in the voting booth, she's like, no. So I don't know.
Well, she shouldn't be leaving the house. She should be staying home and giving beer to her husband.
Hmm.
But anyway, the other issue I wanted to bring up is Biden is beginning to look very peculiar staying in the basement like that.
But
Uh,
he's not just in the basement. But I mean,
he's not
he
giving any rallies. I mean, the man is. I mean, it's very peculiar to vote for a guy that is so afraid of COVID that he can't hold a political rally.
well, Trump's
And
had
and
one
this,
rally. Trump's had
yeah, I
one
know.
rally.
But what I'm saying is, this is going to become more and more of an issue in the next 4.5 months. Is what exactly is Biden doing? When's he coming out? And if he is coming out, where's the rally? I mean, who is he? Is he? I mean, are we electing a guy that can't leave the basement? What if there's another kind of a virus spike and he's president? Will he be stuck in the basement of the White House?
Well, okay. The counter argument to that is to say Bunker Boy about Trump, who he's the one who went down anyway. But let's
That's an unfair comment.
that is it is. But they talk about we don't have a vaccine, but what about recovered people plasma? Aren't there are what about the deal where they pull plasma from people who've
Yeah.
had now
So
isn't that a thing where you can
people think that that's what Boris Johnson got.
so like for people like
The prime
Biden.
minister of Britain was very sick with COVID, and he survived. And the only thing that Trump said about it was that he got something very sophisticated. And right now, with the technology they had a month or two ago, plasma from antibodies from people that have already had it would have been rather sophisticated kind of treatment. It
So
would have been pretty rare.
I would suggest that the two candidates and their wives should, if that's the thing and it's effective, and it can't be for everybody because you can't, but they should probably get that shit so they can go out and do their shit.
Well, I don't know what Trump is on, frankly. I mean, he stopped hydroxychloroquine after the 10-day period that he was supposed to, that is the normal regimen.
Yeah.
So for the past 3 weeks, at least, he hasn't been on anything. He attended this rally. He didn't shake anybody's hands.
Mhm.
He said he shook a few hands at West Point. But I actually, I'm being completely honest with you. I think Biden is beginning to look peculiar. So, I mean, there's nothing stopping him from giving a speech to a few thousand people and then just leaving the auditorium. He doesn't have to shake hands. He doesn't have to kiss people on the lips. He can just give his speech.
Yeah,
And
I think what has happened is they look at the poll numbers and they're like, all right, you've been social distancing and it hasn't been fucking you up, so just keep going with what works. I think if it starts hurting him, then maybe they change the way they do things. I don't know. But one more thing if you want to do it, but if you just want to wrap it up because it's late, we don't
All
have.
right,
You want to talk about?
one more thing, because we can't tease the audience, and then we go, and then
All
we're
right,
done.
Bolton. Do we want to talk about fucking Bolton?
You can talk
Bolton's
about him all you want.
Bolton's book comes out on Tuesday. The White House sued to have it not come out, but it was already out anyway. It had been leaked all over the place. Um, uh, you know, uh, I think without the like what Bolton says is pretty much understood. I think in a general sense that what Trump did with Ukraine, he's done with a bunch of countries, which is he wheels and deals in a way that would be considered improper in an earlier era, and now I think you guys might argue has kind of been normalized that that's just Trump being Trump.
I
Um,
don't know what you're talking about. Biden is the one that was bribed by the Ukrainians, not Trump.
yeah, all right. We've had that argument a million times, but the Bolton book says that Trump says, look, would you please buy a bunch of our soybeans so I win the re-election? He says to China.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think that surprises anybody on either side.
Well,
Um,
it does to me. I think I don't give that any credibility.
well, let me make
I
my
don't. I
argument.
mean, you may think that, but I don't. But go ahead.
Okay, but let me make my argument that shit like this at this point, like you can argue till the cows come home about the fucking dossier and all that shit, and let's please not. But I'm saying that the time for that changing anybody's mind, if anybody's mind could ever be changed, is done. That now we're in the fucking election pipeline, and it's basically doing the shit that Trump is doing and that Biden will is kind of doing, which is communicating a political presence. And so the whole deal about hearings and all this shit is falling away as each candidate communicates their personality. Is that a reasonable argument?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I mean, I'm not particularly worried about the Trump book. I wish it wasn't, coming out and accusing my candidate of all these things. But and as we speak right now, the accusations are that basically Trump will sacrifice America's interests in order to help him get elected. To that effect, things to that effect. And my argument is that I don't ever judge people by what other people say about them. I don't do this in my personal life either. I always judge people by what they actually do. And I have not seen Trump sell out America to other countries. I'm astounded at how vigorously he's opposing China. So there's nothing in the book that could convince me that my eyes, what I see with my own eyes, is wrong. I don't think he's selling out America. So the book doesn't impress me at all. Therefore, I think it's probably a pack of lies. So that's
Yeah.
what I have to say about Bolton's
All right.
book.
Well, I'm not gonna go with the standard liberal line. I don't think Trump sells out America particularly. I think Trump thinks, in a general sense, that what's good for him is good for America, and vice versa. That that if he says to China, "Look, buy our fucking soybeans so I can win again," Trump's not doesn't think he's fucking over America. He thinks he's trying to get China to buy soybeans.
Well, let me tell you very briefly, Rick. Right now, as we speak, there is a vast armada of American warships steaming towards the South China Sea. And if Trump was secretly making uh, brotherly and chummy, friendly deals with China, he would not be steaming a vast, deadly fleet over to the Chinese coast. So, there's nothing you can say that's going to convince me that there are these secret deals when I know that we have dozens of powerful warships that are
Okay, like,
challenging China right now.
my standard argument against that is always, because we've had this same argument about Trump and Russia, that although you can do two things, you can be nice in some, or you can make deals in some ways, and you can like do something, you can do the opposite of that in other ways. That your girlfriend can give you a blowjob. That's a good girlfriend, but she can also jack off that guy she meets at a party in his truck.
Yeah, but the problem is that all I have on one side is Bolton's opinion and your fantasies, and on the other side, I know that there are these aircraft carriers that are heading with deadly intent towards China in order to protect Taiwan. So I'm sorry, I have to go with what is really happening and not what you imagine.
Okay,
That's
one more
my
thing.
problem. And I would be saying this to anybody. I have to say, as a general rule, if you're watching this show and you are a viewer in the public, please base your decisions on politicians on what they're actually doing and not on what your buddies say or what we say or what the news media says. If you know that a giant naval fleet of dangerous warships is steaming towards China, don't base your decision on something that you saw on a left-wing news blog, okay? Just go with the facts.
I can't bring myself to strongly disagree with that.
All right.
But I
Is there
will bring
anything
up
else?
one more
All
book,
right. One
which
more
is,
book.
and then we're done, which is by Mary Trump, she's like I think she's in the one generation younger than Donald Trump, and she is fighting some kind of she signed an NDA or something, but she's saying fuck it, and she's trying to air the family's dirty laundry. And that book is supposed to come out in the next couple weeks.
I could tell you things about my family that would get all of us imprisoned. You know?
You know what? I don't know if you ever experienced this, but we grew up in a time. I remember when I was in the passenger in a car where my dad and my stepmom. My dad was drunk driving. It wasn't on the freeway. It was in a neighborhood, and it was like a summer afternoon party. And my dad was buzzed, and he was buzzed driving. And this was probably 1970, 71. It was exciting. Did you ever? So, I mean, well, you brought up family shit. So, like,
okay, Rick.
Yeah, did you ever go drunk driving with your parents?
Wow. No, not a lot of alcohol in my family, but that sounds pretty exciting for a kid.
Yeah, it was just that one time because I didn't live. I only lived with them like 1 month a year. But anyway, should we wrap it up?
I think so. We did good.
All right. Sorry for
we haven't done.
everybody.
Wait. There's one thing we haven't done in a long time, and that is ask for money.
Okay, if you want to give us money, and I know fucking everybody is like squeezed by fucking horrible conditions, so we forgive you if you don't give us money. It's Lance versus Rick, Lance vs. Rick at gmail.com. That's our PayPal address.
All right.
We'll take anything.
Good job. Yeah, $5 means a lot to guys like us. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Director, we're done. Our director by